Okay, quickly, before we get started on the horse, I have paper here that I have wet down thoroughly, and I have let the paint soak in to the point that the sheen is just left. I've got concentrated, fairly concentrated paint on the tip of this brush. So one of the things that does is that makes a line with soft edges, but they don't go too far. They don't bleed way out. That's still not quite what I'm shooting for. You're going to see here later. Uh, I'll just trim this shape down a little bit in places. See, and I can soften it that way too. So that can give me a little dark line like you would have for a shadow along the side of a vein. We'll come back to that later, but I had the paper ready and I wanted you to see this on white paper so that it would be easier to follow what we're doing. We'll come back to that situation in a little bit. I just had the paper ready. It was right then. Okay, so I have lifted the masking and I have discovered that I did not do a very good job of masking. I was pretty sloppy. A lot of my edges look kind of bad here. I could clean some of that up. I'm probably not going to bother with doing that on this, but I wanted to say that masking can always be a shock. It always stands out more than you expected that it would, and there are usually places that aren't too great when that happens. Let's see, so if we wanted to clean up some of these edges, which I just said I wasn't going to do, but now here I am, I could come along with my lifting brush, I suppose, and, well, this is not going to soften real easily. Okay, in that case, I could trim this spot in a little bit. Don't really quite have the right color. Oh, well, I just scrubbed on that, so I shouldn't have done it right then. We'll just let that fade on into this bridle. That'll kind of minimize it, and you know that could be touched up when it's dry if I wanted to. All right, so I have pulled up all my masking, which included this area right in here. So I did fill in with green paint, and this is now dry. Let's start out with working on the eye. And one of the things about eyes, of course, this looks really flat right now. But I am going to very gently lift some paint out of this eye area where I see a lighter spot where I can kind of see into the brown. It's not near the pupil. Let's blot that and see. Well, not much came up. So let's lift a little stronger line. Unfortunately, I traced a line right here that was probably meant to, I don't know what that was meant to be. I can't tell anymore. But, okay. But even that, even with that mark right in the middle of it, has put a little bit of life into the horse's eye. And I think I could do just a touch of it right over here. Okay, that's better. Now, another thing that frames the horse's eye is actually this light area in under it a little bit. And there's a little light area right there, a little light thingy. And then look right there on the lid, there's a highlight on that lid. So let's do those things. I could take this brush, which is a flat, and I can turn it and use the end of it. So that's like a little tiny flat right there. So let's see what we can do. I just want to highlight right here, and I'm being gentle with it, But I got to tell you, we worked very, very wet in a lot of our layers. And because of that, these areas don't lift quite as easily. Now I want that to be a highlight and not be everywhere, so don't cover the whole lid. Okay, that's better. Now let's see about lightening some of this. And that's a grayer area than what I made it, which might have some effect too. Looky right here. There's a little bit of a light triangle coming out that way. I'm going to use that. That points to the eye. We don't want to make the horse's eyes bigger than they are because it looks, you know, like My Little Pony or something. But at the same time, if we can add to the eye just a little bit, that is, not make it bigger, but make it, just make sure that you got it framed well. Let's put it that way. Okay. Now this brow bone right there is stands out a little more than I've noticed on horses before. Not that I have much horse experience. But you see, we've already got a lot of shaping in here. So we don't need very much lifting. If you do too much, it'll look exaggerated and funny. Just a little bit. Now right here above the eye. See, that area is lighter, and then there's a little area that comes out like that. We could have painted this and gotten this in. But quite frankly, I just got tired of all the painting. I'm ready to shift gears here. I'm making little strokes because I'm being very careful. That looks a lot better because that indentation was coming down way too far. It looks strange. Okay, that looks much better. And we're going to do a lot of painting on this too. But, I mean, some painting left. But I'm looking at this area right here. And this actually kind of comes down this way just a little bit. Let's fade it out right there and see what we get. Now that's much nicer around the eye. I think I could lift a little bit more. Okay, I'm going to leave that for now. Doesn't mean that it's left forever, but I'm leaving it for now. Let's see where else a little lifting could help on the mother. This highlight right here, from under the chin and coming up this way, I think that I need to do a little bit of that. We could probably get by without this area. I'd rather keep that soft. Because like I said, I think we could get by without it even. There's a little dark edge right along here, though, that I really don't like. I'm going to weaken it. I'm not getting rid of it. Part of it's the traced line. I'm just going to weaken it. Now, another place that I noticed where I have something that doesn't look right. You see how this looks like a complete oval on the nostril? Well, here it's not so much. You can tell this area is lighter, and then there's a shape that's shadowed that comes this way, and I cut that off. So I need to go back and do something about that. I'm lifting very, very gently. I don't know how much of this is going to come up. This whole area right there could lift too. Again, this is not lifting coming up very easily because we work this really, really wet, and that sets the paint in the paper more. So you kind of have to be careful with this. Maybe I'll put a little highlight right there on that spot on the tongue. I need a little softer edge there anyway. Yeah, looks pretty good. I could soften a little bit of this. Don't want to overdo it there. Sometimes you might, to soften an edge, you might not blot it all. You might just weaken the edge. So this area, there's going to have to be a little bit more painting done here. But I don't want to do it right now because I've got that roughed up surface. I don't want to lift this vein right now. We're going to try to make this vein look convincing. I don't know how good it's going to turn out. But there could be a little lifting there too, but I don't want to lift first because I don't want to rough the, once I've roughed the paper up, I want that to sort of be the last thing. I could even lift a little along the back of the ear. We could certainly do some lifting here. And I'm going to join some of these strokes, but I'm going to lift them in a way that looks like clumps of hair, I hope. There we go. Now let's look at that shape. Okay, I want this to connect here. I don't want a bunch of little lines. I want some jagged edges on it. All right, maybe I should say variegated edges. Yeah, something like that. You know, you can do that back here too and on this. I'm not going to do all of it. I'm trying to keep these videos down to 30 minutes because they download so much better, which is why you're getting more short videos now. And so you're getting more videos. I have to do one and download it before I do the next one. I seem to be having better luck that way. I don't know if it's an accident or if there's an actual reason for it. Up here in the background, I got a clump of paint stuck. Now, it's not bothering me, but let's see. That's not wanting to lift very much. It's lifting a little bit. I could just come back with more green on top of that. There, see, and get that. So baby here, same thing, look at his ear. This should be a little lighter right in through here. I'm not doing much lifting, but I'm doing it in a lot of places. Looks like he sort of has a little ridge right along there, some kind. I don't know what that's about. I'm probably not going to bother with trying to make it in. Okay, on the sides of his face, you can definitely see lighter areas that are soft. And here's the thing, those are subtle. Those are not near as light as your brain wants to perceive them because that's that's an optical illusion. So let's be careful and let's just lighten just a little bit. I would say better too little than too much. This comes along the side of the eye and then down a little bit. Here's another little spot right here. And if I need to pull on over the bridle area, I'll do that. Okay, right here. They've got a really heavy brow ridge and then a very flat cheek. I think that's about being able to see predators, the flat cheek. See, I'm going to go right over the bridle. I don't think that's going to bother us in painting that much. And I am very light and gentle here. And we can't really see a highlight in his eye. We can see one little area, but I don't know if I can make it work. It's okay, I guess. But you don't really see a defined eye much here. Okay. You know, same deal. You could put a little bit of highlights on his mane, or you could lighten some areas where it blends into the green in the background, and don't blot it. Just do that back and forth and leave it alone. Well, pretty much leave it alone. Let's see. Yeah. And you'll get this softened, lost into the background area. Horsehair is so coarse that you really can kind of see every hair in some places. Yeah, just pulling that into the background. See, up here, I had intended to have that kind of softened effect too, and I got a little bit sloppy. And at the first, and got a little too much of that. So I'll show you about fixing that some, since I've probably led some of you into doing that. That's better right there, but if I pulled up a little of the green, oh dear, I had gotten rid of the green to make room for other color. Well, let's just... We'll just let those emerge a little bit. Okay. So I need to stop and dry this. Hi again. So I think that this is going to take one more video after this. Okay. First thing I'm going to do is I am going to pre-wet this area right through here, and I'll explain why in a minute. I'm going to pre-wet through here. I'm going to go around the eye and down this way. So I got that pretty wet because remember when we did this and we worked on moist paper that no longer had shine on the surface? That's what we're going to do here, because when you look at the horse, she just isn't quite a horse yet. And part of the reason is this shape right through here. There's kind of a divide right there coming down in this way, and then you have some dark, because this is part of this brow bone. It's darker right there, you know, comes down this way, and then we need to define those shapes a little more. And while we're at it, we need to also darken this some more. And I am going to do that. I didn't wet that part because I want to darken that more heavily, and I'm just going to use a gray wash. So I went back when you weren't looking and lifted this ear a little bit, because although the ear is actually darker than she is in the photo, I just find it more convenient to come in and darken this and let the ear come out in front of it and be a little bit lighter. So that's where we are with this. Let's see how much that has soaked in. Let's see if there's something else we need to do. I'm going to be okay with that ear. It's not great, but I'm going to be okay with it. Oh, let's work on this little area while we wait for that to soak in a little more. So I've got my tiny brush, and I've got our gray mixture here. I think I've got enough to last. So I'm just getting a little of that. This is dry right now here. On the tip of a moist brush, because I wanted to correct this area right here. I want to pull this a little more out that way. And then from there, oh, I need to pre-wet that. Well, I'm not going to. I'll do it differently. I'm going to get this a little bit wetter right down. I mean, a little bit darker right down through here. And when that's dry, you won't even be able to tell that it's a separate wash or separate application. I shouldn't call that a wash. Maybe just a little darker right there. Okay. So I want to add a little bit of an extension here. I'll tell you what, let's do. Let's get that gray right here. And then we're going to pull that out with our 1/2 inch. And let's just, there's a little bit dark right there. Again, let's make sure this is just barely moist here. But I didn't take it off the tip. I just want to soften that. This area right here, this shape could come in here a little bit more. So you see, I didn't just dive in there and get this right off. If I were someone who painted a lot of horses and I had some sort of stereotype built into my head, I might just, without all this thought, you know, whack out something that looked very horse-like. But I don't have those practice things built in. And sometimes I know when people do that with the human head, it gets a little, well, it just quite misses the mark a little bit. So also, when I looked at this eye, when I look at the highlight, or I shouldn't call it a highlight, but it's a lighter area in this eye. When I look at it from close up, it doesn't look too bad. It's not quite right. It's a little too light, but it's not too bad. But when, whoops, wrong paint. Nope, right paint. When I look at this from a distance, it's a different story. So you need to always look at your painting from a distance too. It just doesn't read the same. I'm just going to put a little Quin Gold into that, just Quin Gold. And we'll see what that does. Okay, when it's dry, we'll see how that looks. Now let's check this. This is still wet. What I'm going to do, let's start out with the stuff that's on the dry part of the paper. So let's come in under here. We'll kind of merge that mane a little bit into this. There, see, there, right there is where I hit the wet area. And now this time I'm going to pay attention as I'm painting around the ear. In fact, I'll turn it this way so I can see what I'm doing right there where the ear is. And let's come down this way. There. Now, what we need, I'm going to get my brush washed out. Let's look at this again. It's got a little bit of moisture on it. It would be best to let that set long enough that it just soaked in or air dried, whatever it did. We don't want it to air dry. We want as much as possible to soak in. But I'm going to do that. And then we're going to work on some area here. This needs to get darker. And then coming right down this way. Oh, that's better already. So that's still a little too wet, but it's fine for what I'm doing right now because I'm going to just gently tease this along a little bit. Let's put a little more color right there. We need a little more dark right here too. Maybe put a little more right in there too. I don't know if I like that. This is dry paper here. I'm really going to soften that a lot. Now, I can work on top of this without the underlayers coming up much because as you noticed, we had difficulty in lifting with a lifting brush. We'd do much better with a with Mr. Magic. If I could do little things with it, I would. So, I don't want that to get too dark. So we can work on this without disturbing the underneath very much. Well, the sheen is totally, there's no sheen there, so let's try this. I wanted to get that little vein right there. And maybe I won't follow the vein, the path of the vein all the way. You know how I like to break up lines. Here it is down here. A little bit more of a vein going that way. One mistake would be to get that vein too dark, which it is right now. If I get it too light, I can perform the same procedure over it again after I get it dry until I get it just right. Right here, and this vein is much, much paler. There's just a hint of a shadow there. Let's wash that brush out again. I didn't quite get it. I think the positioning is wrong too. Okay, that looks better to me. This part would have been better, I think, if I'd kept more brown right in this area. But I'm going to let that go. I'm going to call that almost it. We need a few, like, ear hairs in here on him. This would work better maybe if I use sort of a, well, we'll see what this mixture may be a little too red. Well, I don't know if that's terribly convincing. I've got an iris planned next, and it's already on my mind. I'm ready to be through with the horses. Yes, the yearly iris. That's right. Okay, maybe there. Oh, he's missing a little bit of shape down here that we could put in. Let's see what we can do with this. See this little I'm trying to work with just the edge, the corner of this, but the corner is flattening out really rapidly. It's just, the corner's disappearing. And we want that to be subtle. The other thing we could do is just weaken this edge of the shadow here a little bit, and I'm kind of combining a lighter area there with a little bit lighter area in the shadow to convey some of this shape. I'm not going to get carried away with that either. Maybe just a little bit. Okay, see that's just, I think that's a little bit better there. Also, on her, we're going to need to put a little bit of blue-gray shading in the white. Let's see. Let's just pick up a little more blue. I've got some blue and some brown there. This will be a little bit bluer. And the problem is that she's still wet. Tell you what, we'll save that and we'll start talking about the bridle. Tell you what we'll do. We'll stop here and then we will do the bridle and that little bit of shading there, and we'll call it a horse. Okay, so one more video that'll be short, and you can consider it to be part of the same lesson. I just can't get my recordings to download properly if I let them get too long.